Now we're going to look at the expansion panel. Here's an example. As you can see, it's just a panel with a little arrow, and when you click the arrow, it expands out to show more information. Let's go ahead and check this out. We use our live template, and the first thing we're going to do here is make another class. Let's call this my item, actually. And in here, we're just going to say this dot is expanded, this dot header, and this dot body. So what we're really doing is we're just making a class that's going to hold the information we need for the expansion panel list. We've got an is expanded, just a Boolean, along with a string header and a widget body. Pretty self-explanatory. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our actual class here. Grab our init state. And let's make a list. Not a linear progress bar, a list. There we go. Thank you, IntelliSense. Okay, now that we've got our list, let's go into our init state and let's flesh this out. And in here, we are going to say items.add. So initially, we do not want these expanded. And for the header, we're just going to say item and whatever the index is. In this case, we're just going to say I. Now the body, this is where we're going to just add a container. Let's add edges at all 10. And for the child here, we're just going to add a new text. Just simply saying hello world. So as soon as our state's initialized, we're just going to populate this list. And let's go ahead and let's make a create item function. This function is going to return an expansion panel. And let's do this. All right, so the expansion panel is the individual panels where the expansion list holds all of the panels in there. So let's go ahead and move this out. We've got a little bit that we need to do here. We have a header builder. Whenever you see builder, think we need a function and we're going to have to populate that. So let's say build context along with a bool is expanded. Now in here, we're just simply going to return a new container. And we're going to have some new edges at all padding. And let's do 5. Then we've got a little bit of padding, but it's not overbearing. And in here, we're just going to make the header. And let's say header. Got a little ahead of myself there. There we go. So really all this does is it takes my item and it converts it into an expansion panel and removes it back. I shouldn't say it converts it, it wraps it around an expansion panel and then returns it. So for our body, we want the actual item body. And let's go in here. And then we're just going to return those. So we've got our header builder, our body, and it is expanded. Now comes the fun part. We're going to actually build this thing out. So we've got our container along with a column. And we're going to get rid of some of this stuff here. So we've got our body as a new container with our padding. And let's get rid of this right here. If you're wondering why we're getting rid of that, it's because we're simply going to include a list view. And in our list view here, we want to add some stuff. List view is going to take an array of widgets, and we're going to say new expansion panel list. And we've got some things we've got to fill out here. So we've got an expansion callback. This is the actual function that's going to determine what happens when this thing is expanded here. So let's go ahead and flesh this out. There we go. We're going to want to set the state. Pretty much whenever you see something on the screen being rendered or updated, your first thought should be, okay, state is being set in the background here somewhere. So we're going to set the state. We're going to say items, and then we want the actual index here. We want is expanded, not items dot is expanded. I should say items index. Sorry about that. So we're just going to flip that around. Probably help if I had the equal sign in there. And then at the very end of this, this is where it gets a little bit confusing here. We're going to go here. And our children is actually going to be items, and we're going to map this. Now, if you remember from our Dart tutorials, mapping just takes a list and maps each item to a function. So we're going to map each item to the create item function, and then we're going to just say toList. Let's go ahead and restart that from the beginning. And you can see here's our expansion panels, and everything's working as expected. Now, because this is a little bit confusing, I want to go over this just a little bit here. So really what's going on is we have our myItem class, which has our information. In there, key points is expanded, the header and the body, along with the constructor. We have a list of those items, and in the state, we're actually just making our list. Then we have our create item function, which is actually being mapped into each individual item, and we're calling the create item on each item in our items list. Whew, that is confusing. So let's make that a little simpler. We just simply have a list of items, and we're going to map that to the create item function and convert it back to a list and hand it as the child in the children. In this lesson, we're going to look at the tab bar view. It's a pretty complex piece of code here. Well, at least complex compared to what we're doing. And if you've been following along at all with the official Flutter page, you'll see there's actually an example out there. I've talked to a few people and they've asked me questions about this, and that's why I wanted to do this specific example, because when you go out and look at their code, it gets pretty complex pretty fast, and a lot of people have come to me saying, hey, I don't understand what this is doing, how does this work? So we're just going to take a similar example, it's going to be a little bit different, and we're just going to break it down into something easy to understand. So let's go ahead and let's load up our live template. First thing we're going to want to do is make a new class. Call it choice. And in here we want the string title. This is just going to be the title of the choice and then the icon data. We'll call this icon. And let's make our default constructor. Okay, now this is where things get really confusing really fast. First thing we're going to do is we're going to use a mixin. I hope you paid attention into your Dart lessons. We're going to use the single ticker provider state mixin. I dare you to come up with a longer name for your classes. That is complex. Okay. Now, I'm going to make a controller. And we're going to make a list. And rather than typing it all out, I'm just going to copy and paste what I've got already. So we've got a list of our choice class. And as you can see, we have a car, bicycle, boat, bus, train, and walk. And with the icons showing up on the left. Saves us a little bit of screen time here, so you don't have to sit there and watch me type out each individual element. Each choice has got a title and an icon in it. All right, let's go ahead and get our initial state. And in our initial state, we're going to say controller equal new, and we want a tab controller. The length is going to be the items.length. This is the length of the list that we just generated. And the vsync or vertical sync, we want to do this. That way it knows what objects it's actually syncing with. Now, the build is going to be a little bit tricky. We're going to play around with this quite a bit. So you can see how we have an app bar in here. What we want to do is modify this app bar, and we're going to give it a bottom property. The bottom is going to be a new preferred size, and in here we have child and preferred size. So the preferred size, let's say, let's move this here, just because I want to. We'll say const size, and we want from height, and let's say 48.0. The child, we're going to make a new theme here. Theme has data and child, so let's branch those out here. All right. So in the theme, the data, let's set these to theme.of, and we want the current context, and we want to copy with color, and we want accent color, color's white. That is confusing. So what is this doing here? Well, we're saying take the theme of the current context and then copy it, and we're going to copy it with this current color right here. So the accent color is going to be color white. That's pretty confusing. All right, so now we've got a child. We're just going to make a new container. The child's padding, let's set this padding to... Actually, we're not going to do any padding. We're going to say height. We want this to be 48.0. We could pad it if we wanted to. It just looked a little weird. That's why I stopped and said, no, let's not do that. So the alignment, we want the align center. And then in here, we'll have a child. And that child will be a new, and we want a tab page selector. And this, of course, wants the controller, and we're going to just hand it the controller that we've got in memory. Now, you notice how, boom, no tab controller. We've already got an issue. Let's go ahead and reload this, and let's see what the issue is. Notice how suddenly it works, but nothing's happening because we have nothing to run with. That's why sometimes you got to just do a full application restart. The code works, but when you did a hot reload, it thought it didn't. So let's go ahead and look at our body. We're going to just take this entire body, and we're going to get rid of that. We're going to say new, and we want a tab bar view. And in our tab bar view, we've got a few properties we need to flesh out here. So the first thing we're going to do is actually put in the controller. And then we want to add in our children. And we want to do items. And we want to map this. Remember, what map does is it takes each item in the list and maps it, quotey fingers, over to a function. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to just say bang, bang. And now we've got a choice item. So what we're really doing here is we're mapping this to an anonymous function. And in this function, we're going to get a little crazy. We're going to say return new container. And it's still having a problem. Let's see here. Argument type iterable container can't be assigned to type list widget. Wonder what that's complaining about. Oh, yes. We got that container. We want to list, oh, that's the wrong spot. There we go. I always forget to list, and I always have that issue, so I wanted to catch that early on here. All right, so in our container here, we want to do some padding. And let's do a new edge set all, and let's do this as 25.0. We're just going to bump that off the top of the phone there. And then child, we want to do a new center. Now that we've got it centered, we want a child within here, and we're going to say, let's add a new column. And of course we want children. I'm just going to scroll down a bit so you guys can see. Now within the children, we can actually add our individual widgets here. So let's go ahead and add a new text. And we want to map that to the item.text, or actually the item title. And then we want to do a new icon. And we want to map this to the item.icon. And we want to make that a little bigger. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set the size of that. We're going to set that to 120.0. Hot reload, and as you can see, now it is working. So breaking this down, and some things people have had some real problems with, is getting the controller to sync up. That's the vsync this. You have to actually do that, otherwise it will not work. And the theme gets a little bit confusing. And this right here is just really, really a chore to try to figure out on your own if you're not really used to that style of programming. Really all we're doing is we're saying take a tab bar view, give it the controller. The children, we're just taking the items and mapping them to an individual function. Map is a really handy feature, but as you can see, it can get really confusing. And do not forget to do the tool.List at the very end of that. Pretty simple, pretty clean. In this lesson, we're going to look at the step widget. You can see it here. We've got 3 steps, and each step has a continue or cancel. So we can continue, and then we can cancel back. Let's go ahead and look at the code. All right, first thing we're going to want to do here is let's, of course, make our list. And let's initialize our state. In here, we're going to say new step. And each step, of course, has a title and content. So the title is going to be a new, we want a text widget. Content, we're just going to say new text. And is active, we want this to be true because the step is actually active and we want to be able to use it. So we're just going to copy this. We've got 3 steps. Now, we want to have a step continue, a step cancel, and a step tap. These are the different functionalities of that. Let's go ahead and add this in. Maybe if I could spell continue. There we go. Wow, that was moderately embarrassing. There we go. So we've got our continue, step cancel, and then the step tap. Step tap takes a little bit of explaining. They can actually tap on the individual step and jump directly to it rather than going back and forth between continue and cancel. Let's flesh these out super quick. So when we continue, we just want to set state. And I'm going to just copy and paste that to save a little bit of time in the near future. Now what we're going to do in the continue is we're going to current plus, and we're going to say if current is greater than or equal to step length, then we want to actually set the current to the very last one here. And I'll just copy this again. And then we're going to say if current is less than 0, decrement that instead of increment. Then we want current step to actually equal 0. That way it's at the very beginning. And then for tap, all we're really going to do here is we're going to say current equals index. And just jump them directly to that. And because we're doing all this in state, it will automatically update in the background. Now, what we need to do here is we need to actually modify this body. We've got our container, we've got our edge inset padding, and for our child here, let's get rid of this right here. Let's get rid of that. So we've got it nice and centered, and let's say new stepper, and this is where we need to fill in our steps. Along with that, let's fill in our other properties. So we want a type, and the type is going to be a stepper vertical instead of a horizontal. Along with this, we need to actually set the current step. And then we need to set our on step cancel, on step continue, and our on step tap. Save this, and hot reload should pick it up. Sure enough, it did. So it now works as expected. Actually, let's restart the whole thing because it was still showing the old code. I want to make sure. There it goes. Do something, and do something, and of course works as expected here. Something to note is the actual type here. If you switch that to horizontal, the steps go across now. But you notice how I'm not getting the graphical update. You can also click on the individual step. And let's play around with this is active. Let's run this. See how step 2 is not active? We can still go to step 2, but it's not an active step. Switch this to false. Switch this to horizontal. So the isActive is meant to be kind of like an active tracer, but it doesn't really work as expected in the horizontal part. So we would have to actually do that manually. So let's go in here and let's play around with this a little bit. And let's say notice how is active because it's final, can't really modify it. That's one of the shortcomings that I found with this control. I'm sure there's a way around it, but I haven't actually gotten it to work yet. Just keep that in mind. Vertical seems to work good, horizontal just does not seem to work that well. I'm sure there's a way around it. I just personally haven't found it out yet. In this lesson, we're going to look at the grid view control, as you can see here. Now, most grid view control tutorials are going to talk about enterprise data and how to do like a miniature little Excel thing, and I thought we would skip all that and just do something fun. So what we're making here is basically a mini video game called Treasure Hunt. As you can see from the debug info, treasure is in area 13, which is right here. But the user doesn't know that, so they're just going to blindly click. Nope, it's not there. Nope, it's not there. It is there. So this is the game we're going to make. Let's go ahead and look at the code. Okay, what we need to do here is import dart.math. It's always scary when you're going to use math. Math has not always been my friend. Okay, so now that we've got this, let's make a class here. We're going to make an area class. And in here, we're going to say int index string name. We want a color. And let's make a constructor for this. Did not like that. What did I do? Oh, I see what I did wrong here. And let's make this light blue accent. There we go. So we have our nice little area class. Those are the rectangles that you saw. We're going to go ahead and start building this game out here. So let's say int location. This is going to be the location of the treasure. We want to make a list, and let's call this areas. Going to call our init state. And in init state, this is where we're going to build a lot of stuff here. So we're going to say areas equal new list, and we want this to be an area list. We're going to make some areas here. All right. We want our area and we want the index to be I. And let's give it the name. We want to keep the color as default for now. So really all we're doing is we're just populating that list here. And then we're going to, let's make a random number generator. Let's make RNG. We're going to make a new random. So what this is doing here is we're taking new random and we want the location of the treasure to be a random number somewhere between 0 and the maximum in the list. All right, got that in there. And let's go ahead and let's make our generate function. So we're going to say widget generate So we want a grid tile, and this is what's going to actually generate the on-screen graphical display. So far all we've been doing is making a list, but now we want to actually build something that's going to show on the screen. So that's our grid tile. The grid tile is the individual square that goes into the grid view. So the child of this is going to be a new container. And in here we want to do some padding. And let's say 5.0. And let's make a child on this. We want this to be a raised button. No, we don't have the on-click. Let's go ahead and make that super quick here. And let's go back up here and let's fill it in. All right, so actually we gotta do this a little bit differently here. Let's call it on press. That's bugging me that it's just two different things here. There we go. That makes more sense. Sometimes it bothers me when I mix and match on clicked and on pressed. So for color, let's do the areas. The color, and let's do a child. We're going to actually add the text here. And let's add the name. Let's do some alignment here. Text align, we want to do text align center. So really what we're doing here is we're building this out. We're saying, hey, we want this grid tile to have a container that's padded, that's got a raised button. And in that button, we want it to have the color and the text. Okay, so now we've got our onPressed event here. And in here, we're going to set state. Oh, I screwed that one up. There we go. And in our set state, we want to actually, just see if this has got the actual index of where the treasure is. So if index equals the location, then we found the treasure. So then we want to say areas index dot color, and we want to say colors dot green. And if you're making an actual game, you would say like you won or something, give them a score. Otherwise, we're just going to copy and paste this, and we're going to make it red. Let them know that, nope, they did not get it. Now, we got to actually display all this stuff. This is the fun part. We've got our body, which has got a container, edge inset at all. We've got a center, and inside that center, we want to actually add something. So let's get rid of this column here. And instead, let's add our grid view. And we don't want a grid view straight. Sorry about that. We want a grid view.count. There we go. So cross-axis count 4. If you're wondering how I got that magical number, we've got 16 squares and we want them 4 across. And then for our children, and we want this to be 16, and we want our generator. So this looks very confusing, and I'm going to start the app in the background because it's going to take just a second to restart that. So what we're doing here is we're saying we want a center, and in the center we want a new child, which is a grid view.count. That calls a special function. You've seen like the list view build. So the cross access means we're going to have 4 across. The children, we're making a new list filled with widgets, and we're going to generate that dynamically. It's going to be 16 total, and we're going to use the generate function, which we've written up here. That's going to actually render this out, the whole grid tile. So here it is. Let's restart this. I didn't add the debug statement, so I don't know where that treasure is. Let's see if we can find it here. I'm not there. It is. It was in area 6. Sure enough, if we keep clicking, it's just going to be all red.